Imagine you are sitting in a tiny, cramped metal capsule, nearly 250,000 miles from Earth.
Which is just a terrifying thought right off the bat.
Oh, absolutely. And you look out your window into the absolute pitch blackness of the lunar night, and, well, hovering out there in the void is a glowing, segmented blue streak.
Right, a complete visual impossibility.
Exactly. Then, as you were trying to process this, your primary life-saving flight computer suddenly starts pulsing the number 8 over and over, completely locking up the display.
Just totally seizing up.
So what do you do? Because, this isn't some science fiction scenario we're making up. This is the actual documented reality of early space exploration.
It really is, and it completely shatters that pristine, mathematically perfect image we usually associate with the Apollo missions.
It totally does. The friction between our expectations of a clean, sterile mission and the gritty, confusing reality is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
Because the official highlight reels, they give us this heavily curated view, right? We see the gleaming silver ships, the sterile white suits.
The perfectly clipped professional audio from Houston.
Exactly. But the raw data paints a vastly different picture. The cosmos is a profoundly messy, chaotic, and, frankly, actively hostile environment.
Yeah, our hardware and even our human senses were just simply not evolved to operate out there.
Not at all.
So we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of source material today to look into this. We have a collection of archival lunar surface photographs curated by space.com.
Which are incredible to look at.
They really are. And we are cross-referencing those images with official declassified Apollo-era mission transcripts, specifically tapes 903, 904, 909, and 938.
That's a great stack of sources.
Right. Our mission today is to understand the unexplained and the unexpected. We want to know what actually happens when astronauts encounter phenomena out in the void that just defy immediate logic. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, when analyzing these archival sources, the most critical element to observe is the psychological discipline of the crew. And the ground control team, for that matter.
Oh, totally. The calmness is surreal.
It really is. Up there, the standard rules of physics, how light scatters, how objects move, how electronics behave, they apply in ways that completely scramble human intuition.
Right. Everything is just fundamentally different.
Yeah. Yet when you read these raw, minute-by-minute transcripts, you witness an astonishing level of compartmentalization.
They are confronting bizarre visual anomalies and critical equipment malfunctions with, the casual tone of someone diagnosing a flat tire.
Precisely. It's just another day at the office for them.
So before we dive into the communications between the spacecraft and Houston, I think we really need to establish the visual context first.
Good idea.
The Space.com archive provides a series of photographs taken directly on the lunar surface. And the visual contrast in these images is incredibly violent.
Violent is the perfect word for it.
Right. Because without an atmosphere to create twilight or, diffuse the sun's rays, there are no gradients. You only have blindingly bright lunar dust, pitch-black shadows stretching for miles, and a sky that is just an absolute bottomless void.
What's fascinating here is the absence of atmospheric scattering. It's paramount to understanding these photos.
How so?
Well, on Earth, our atmosphere softens light, right? It gives the sky its blue color, and it provides crucial depth perception through a phenomenon called aerial perspective.
Oh, right, where objects further away look hazier.
Exactly. They look hazier and lighter in color because we are looking at them through miles of air. But on the moon, that visual crutch simply does not exist.
So a mountain range 10 miles away looks just as sharp as a boulder 10 feet away.
Precisely. Your brain loses its primary tool for judging distance.
That is so disorienting. And looking at these specific archival photos, the analysts have highlighted several visual anomalies in the pitch-black sky with these zoomed-in yellow boxes.
Yeah, the yellow boxes really draw your eye to the weirdness.
They do. In one image, there are 5 distinct clusters of glowing bluish lights just floating in the void. And in another, there is this bizarre, vertical, segmented blue streak.
It's a very strange shape.
It almost resembles like a piece of neon rebar hanging suspended right above the astronaut's shadow. Other shots reveal solitary bright red and white lights or faint reddish-orange dots hovering against the blackness.
It's easy to see why people jump to conclusions when they look at those.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, my immediate instinct looking at that segmented blue shape is to categorize it as an external object. Are we looking at genuine unidentified objects, or is this just the 1960s equivalent of a smartphone camera lens flare?
That's the big question.
Right, because looking at these zoomed-in yellow boxes, it feels a bit like trying to spot Bigfoot. I have to assume we might just be looking at a microscopic scratch on the camera lens, maybe, or perhaps a static discharge across the film plane, catching that unfiltered solar radiation.
That is a highly precise deduction, actually, and it highlights the necessity of critical thinking when evaluating space photography.
So it is just an artifact.
Well, the human brain is a pattern recognition machine. It desperately wants to assign physical form and distance to those glowing shapes.
We want it to be an object.
Exactly. But in a vacuum environment, the optics of the Hasselblad cameras the astronauts used were subjected to extreme conditions.
Right, they didn't have the protection of the atmosphere either.
Right. Cosmic rays can strike the photographic film directly, leaving streaks and dots. Furthermore, internal lens reflections are incredibly common out there.
How does that happen?
When blinding, unfiltered sunlight strikes the front element of a camera lens at a sheer angle, it can bounce around the internal glass elements. This creates geometric, segmented artifacts that look remarkably like floating structures.
So that neon rebar shape is likely just the sunlight bouncing around inside the camera lens itself.
Highly likely, yeah.
Wow. But we can't just look at these static photographs in isolation to understand the environment. We have to cross-reference the visual artifacts with what the astronauts were physically observing through the windows.
Which is where the transcripts become invaluable.
Exactly. This brings us directly to the mission transcripts, specifically tape 904, page 743.
Oh, this is a great one.
The Lunar Module pilot is looking out the Alignment Optical Telescope, the AOT. They used this to take star sightings for navigation, right?
Yes, it was crucial for figuring out their position.
So he is looking specifically into what they call the dark quadrant, quadrant 1 on the left side of the spacecraft. And he reports seeing what he calls particles of light and flashes of light.
Now, pay close attention to the mechanics of his observation here. He isn't just noting static lights in the distance. He is observing a dynamic physical process.
Right. He notes that these particles are originating from behind his field of view and, in his words, sailing off in space.
He even tries to figure it out in real time.
He does. He actually formulates a working hypothesis on the fly, suggesting they are ice crystals dropping from the spacecraft's own water boiler.
Which makes sense.
But the detail that stands out is his description of their trajectory. He says, some of those things are escaping the moon. They really haul out of here and just press off at the stars.
It's a very poetic way to describe it.
But if it's just water freezing from a boiler, why would it haul out of here and shoot off toward the stars? Down on Earth, a venting boiler just creates a puddle on the floor. Up there, it sounds like they are witnessing a miniature meteor shower originating from their own ship.
Well, the physical mechanisms at play here are deeply counterintuitive. We have to look at the physics of a phase transition within a vacuum.
Okay, break that down for us.
When the spacecraft's environmental control system vents excess water, that liquid is expelled from a pressurized system into an environment with zero atmospheric pressure.
Right, the vacuum of space.
Exactly. In a vacuum, the boiling point of water drops drastically. So the water essentially boils and freezes almost simultaneously. It's a rapid process of sublimation and crystallization.
Wait, so the liquid is turning into jagged microscopic ice prisms the absolute moment it leaves the nozzle.
Precisely. And because there is no air friction, no atmospheric drag to slow these ejected particles down, they retain the kinetic energy of their ejection.
So they just keep going.
Yeah, they travel at a constant velocity indefinitely. The astronauts' description of them pressing off at the stars is a literal observation of Newtonian physics.
That is incredible.
As this cloud of ice prisms expands outward from the spacecraft, the particles cross the terminator line. They move from the shadow of the lunar module directly into the blinding, unfiltered path of the sun.
Oh, and then they catch the light.
Exactly. The moment those jagged ice crystals hit the solar radiation, they refract the light brilliantly. They become these glowing dots suspended in the blackness.
Which directly correlates back to the visual anomalies we saw in the space.com photographs.
Yes, exactly.
The spacecraft is effectively a localized weather system, perpetually surrounding itself with an expanding halo of glowing, crystalline effluent.
That's a fantastic way to visualize it.
And looking at the next piece of source material, take 938, page 778, it becomes abundantly clear that this localized debris field wasn't just a brief, beautiful visual phenomenon.
No, not at all.
It was a persistent operational hazard that actively confuse their navigation and diagnostics.
The transcripts reveal a fascinating intersection between human observation, mechanical telemetry, and the chaotic microenvironment the spacecraft generated.
It's wild. They were operating on the night side of the moon, requiring visual aids for rendezvous procedure.
Yeah, they needed to be able to see each other in pitch black.
So we have this three-way conversation playing out here between Pete, the commander inside the Lunar Module, Dick, the command module pilot orbiting above in the Yankee Clipper, and the Capcom down at Houston.
And Pete is having an issue.
Yeah, Pete radios Houston to report that their exterior tracking light appears to be burned out.
The tracking light being a high-intensity strobe designed to let the command module spot the lunar module against the dark lunar surface.
Right. And the reason Pete believes the bulb is dead is that Dick, up in the Yankee Clipper, cannot spot them through his sextant. But Pete's diagnostic method is where this gets brilliant.
It really is ingenious.
He explains that during their first pass around the night side of the moon, they had a massive cloud of, quote, little bits and pieces floating along with us.
He is referring to the same localized debris field we just discussed, the sublimated ice, along with flecks of mylar insulation and general spacecraft shed.
Pete notes that during that first pass, they could physically see the tracking strobe firing because it was reflecting off the individual pieces of space junk floating outside the window.
They were using the trash as a mirror.
Yes. But now, on the current pass, the debris cloud is still floating right outside the glass. But it is entirely dark. The trash isn't flashing. Therefore, Pete concludes, the tracking light has failed.
Which is perfectly logical.
But Houston pushes back with completely contradictory data. The Capcom replies that their electrical watchers, the engineers monitoring the telemetry back on Earth, are looking at the readouts, and the electrical current indicates the tracking light is drawing power.
The computer says the light is officially on.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Dick, orbiting in the command module, chimes in with a perfectly timed piece of dark humor. Hearing Houston insist the light is on, Dick radios down to Pete, "You're flying through the air backwards then, Pete, because I don't see it."
I love that line. It really shows their mindset.
It does, but it also sets up this massive conflict. So we have Houston's computer saying the light is on, drawing power, but the astronauts literally can't see it reflecting off the debris right outside their window. Who do you trust? The telemetry or the human eye?
Well, this illustrates the unique problem-solving required in space exploration. Telemetry is inherently quantitative, but it is not infallible.
Right, it's just numbers on a screen.
Exactly. The ground computers aren't measuring the actual emission of photons, they are measuring electrical resistance and current draw.
Oh, I see.
So the most likely engineering reality in this scenario is a short circuit within the strobe light's housing. A short would draw the same, if not more, amperage as a functioning bulb.
Which would trick the telemetry into displaying a positive operational status.
Exactly. The brilliant element of this historical exchange is the improvisational engineering by the crew.
Yeah, they are trapped in a pitch-black environment, entirely unable to perform a visual inspection of the hull.
So they utilize the very debris field that is normally a nuisance as a makeshift diagnostic mirror.
That is just incredible. By observing the interaction between their engineered hardware and their accidental waste, they proved the multi-million-dollar telemetry system wrong.
It's a remarkable display of human ingenuity.
But you know, the hostile environment wasn't just creating visual illusions outside the window or shorting out exterior strobes. That same unpredictable environment was wreaking havoc on the internal processing hardware inside the cabin too.
The internal anomalies are arguably even more stressful.
Oh, for sure. This transitions us to the final piece of the puzzle. The internal mechanical anomalies documented in tape 909, page 748, and tape 903, page 742.
The environment inside the microprocessors was proving to be just as volatile as the vacuum outside. The hardware was encountering variables that were nearly impossible to fully simulate in a pristine laboratory on Earth.
So the Lunar Module pilot radios Houston to report an interesting thing going on AGS right now. The AGS is the abort guidance system, right?
Yes. This is the critical backup computer designed to take over and save their lives if the primary navigation system fails during descent or ascent.
So pretty important piece of gear.
Extremely important.
The pilot states that the address and information registers on the AGS are displaying an all 8's flash. The display is just pulsing the number 8 over and over again every single second.
To understand the severity and the mechanics of this, we have to look at how early digital displays functioned. They utilized 7-segment indicators.
Okay, like an old digital alarm clock.
Exactly like that. To display a 1, you illuminate 2 segments. To display a 7, you illuminate 3. But to display an 8, every single segment on the diode must be energized simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when a computer display flashes all 8s, it isn't processing the mathematical value of 8. It is experiencing a raw voltage surge.
So the circuitry is being flooded with anomalous current.
Yes, it's illuminating every single segment of the display board at once.
The life-saving backup computer is essentially having an electrical seizure. I mean, if I'm driving down the highway and my dashboard suddenly lights up every single warning indicator and flashes 8s, I am pulling over and calling a tow truck.
Right. Anyone would.
But these astronauts are sitting in a fragile descent stage on the surface of the moon. Yet Houston's response to the critical backup computer seizing up is chillingly casual.
It really is.
The Capcom simply replies, "Roger, Fredo is here." He notes that a specific engineer witnessed this exact phenomenon during testing back on Earth at Bethpage.
Bethpage, New York, being the location of the Grumman manufacturing facility where the Lunar Module was designed and built. They had seen this glitch on the factory floor.
So the Capcom casually diagnoses the flashing 8s as probable EMI electromagnetic interference and notes that, quote, TRW's got a workup on this problem. TRW being the aerospace contractor.
Right.
They're literally telling astronauts on the moon that the engineers back at the office are looking into a known bug on the life-saving computer.
Just unbelievable composure.
And amidst all these glitches, the crew is actively preparing for a rendezvous sequence. Over on tape 903, the command module pilot in the Yankee Clipper casually mentions he just got the house clean.
Sweeping up the cabin.
Yeah, and Houston jokes about a couple of coal miners coming up to see him.
That's a reference to how deeply covered in abrasive, dark lunar dust the Lunar Module crew will be after their surface walk.
Right, and then they just lock in the liftoff time for 142 hours, 3 minutes, and 47 seconds, completely unfazed by the flashing 8s. It's wild. You aren't on a highway. You're waiting for coal miners to launch off the moon at hour 142. How do they stay so calm?
This raises an important question about the normalization of the abnormal. The psychological discipline required to operate under those conditions is staggering.
I mean, they are launching off the moon with a glitching backup computer simply because a guy named Fredo saw it happen back in New York.
The decision to launch despite the EMI glitch speaks to the foundational philosophy of early spaceflight engineering. Perfection in a vacuum environment was understood to be impossible.
They just accepted it.
They had to. The hardware was subjected to cosmic radiation, extreme thermal cycling, and stray electromagnetic fields. Dealing with ghosts in the machine, phantom sensor readings, voltage spikes, and bizarre visual artifacts was just factored into the daily commute.
That is so intense.
The engineers at Grumman and TRW had built in layers of redundancy. As long as the core mathematical processing was holding up beneath the display errors, they could afford to shrug off a pulsing screen.
So the calmness you hear in the transcripts isn't a lack of awareness at all.
No, it is a highly trained operational discipline. Because, simply put, panic in a vacuum is a death sentence.
Panic in a vacuum is a death sentence. Wow. That fundamentally alters the lens through which we view these historical documents.
It really does.
The astronauts weren't just executing a flight plan, they were actively managing their own psychology. They had to maintain absolute trust in their training, in their ground team's telemetry analysis, and in their own ability to adapt to an environment that was constantly throwing deeply counterintuitive physics at them.
They had to filter out the noise, whether the noise was a cloud of sparkling ice crystals, a dead strobe light, or a surging digital display.
So let's synthesize the journey we've taken through this stack of sources today. We began with the space.com archival photographs, dissecting visual impossibilities, like those segmented blue streaks and glowing clusters in the absolute dark.
Right. And we applied critical physics to understand how the lack of atmospheric scattering, combined with cosmic rays, turns internal camera reflections into what looks like floating monoliths.
Then, we cross-referenced those static images with the live transcripts, discovering that the spacecraft's own sublimating water boiler was creating a high-velocity debris field of glowing ice prisms.
Which the crew brilliantly utilized as a diagnostic mirror.
Exactly. They used their own trash to prove the Houston telemetry wrong about their tracking light.
Such a great moment.
And we concluded with the internal environment, where stray electromagnetic interference caused critical guidance computers to surge with voltage.
Flashing endless H.
Right, while the crew just casually prepared their coal miner suits for a lunar launch. When you immerse yourself in these raw operational details, it completely shatters the clean, sterile narrative of space history.
It wasn't clean at all.
The reality was Incredibly gritty, deeply confusing, and heavily reliant on human intuition overriding mechanical failures. So what does this all mean?
Well, when you look at the totality of these sources, a rather profound realization emerges about our relationship with exploration.
That's that.
When a spacecraft travels hundreds of thousands of miles into the void, it doesn't just passively observe the environment, it fundamentally alters the space around it.
Oh, I see what you mean.
A tiny metal habitat venting fluids, shedding mylar, and emitting electromagnetic fields creates its own chaotic microenvironment. It forces us to ask a really difficult question.
What question is that?
As we build more sensitive instruments and look deeper into the cosmos, searching for anomalies in the pristine black of space, are we occasionally just seeing the ripples of our own wake?
Yeah.
Are the mysteries we try so hard to categorize simply the reflections of our own messy presence pushing into the void?
That is an incredibly powerful thought to leave you with. The next time you look up at the moon, look past the pristine white suits and the perfect math. Remember the coal miners, the localized ice storms, the flashing aids, and the messy, brilliantly improvised reality of the human beings who actually navigated the void. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the archives. We are already building the next stack of sources, and we can't wait to unpack them with you. Catch you next time.